Did you know that there are some pond plants that can be grown in and out of an aquarium that help filter the water? The one in particular that we're talking about today is Dwarf Umbrella Sedge. We're going to go over the growing habits, how to maintain it, how to grow it in a pond, but also out of an aquarium. And it's such a versatile plant and can make a huge positive impact on your water quality. But before we get started, I want to tell you about the new Plant Life Project Facebook group. This is where you can share pictures of your tanks. You can get growing information, tips on aquarium and riparian plants, and connect with other members. It's the new community side of Plant Life Project. So please join us there. We would love to have you in the group. We are just getting it fired up, but I know it's going to be a fabulous resource for you. Well, let's get back to talking about umbrella sedge. Also known as umbrella palm, it's not a true palm, nor is it a grass. It's actually in the sedge family, and it's in the same genus as papyrus. In fact, another name for it is umbrella papyrus. Native to Africa, Madagascar, and even the Arabian Peninsula, umbrella sedge thrives in full sun and heat and naturally grows in wetlands and along streams and lakes and rivers, where it can form dense, vast colonies. It grows well and is perennial even in subtropical regions. It can be grown as an annual outdoors in northern zones. It's been a popular ornamental plant for many decades for larger in-ground and even in small container ponds. It can be grown in mesh pond baskets or solid wall planters hanging from the rim of a container pond or placed on bricks to elevate it. It has a clumping growth habit in which the root ball and crown expand outward as it continually grows new stalks and eventually forms a solid, dense clump which gets larger with each growing season. And these can grow indefinitely, which is how they form massive colonies. But it is easily controlled by growing it in a container. Eventually, they do need to be removed from the container and divided simply to control its size, as is the case with many marginal aquatic plants. I love to grow it in container ponds where it adds a strong vertical element and a tropical vibe. It doesn't have a big showy flower. It's really prized for its foliage. It grows well with clay potting media with fertilizer, or it can be planted in plain gravel just to support it and take its nutrients from the water. It's really not picky about the media it's growing in as long as there's enough nutrients. It works great as a tall background plant with shorter species growing underneath, or it can be grown all by itself. It develops a dense and fibrous root system and does a great job at feeding on excess nutrients in the pond water, helping to keep algae under control. Dwarf umbrella sedge does require some maintenance, especially when growing in a container pond or out of an aquarium. When it becomes overgrown in the planter, especially if the new shoots from the crown start extending over the edge of the pot, then it's definitely time to divide. And dividing is easy. You just take the plant out of its pot, then take a sharp spade, shovel, trowel, knife, whatever you have, and divide the root ball into halves or thirds depending on the overall size. Then take one of the halves or thirds and replant it. The remaining sections can be given away or thrown away responsibly. Dwarf umbrella sedge is such a resilient plant, it will recover quickly. You could even go so far as to divide it into finger-width size plugs, and it would still live and thrive. Apart from division, which may or may not be needed in a single growing season, it just depends. The only other maintenance needed is trimming off any shoots that get in the way of other plants or that start leaning over more than you want them to. And it grows wonderfully in full sun to part shade. Now, in smaller container ponds, it's really best to avoid full sun all day. But that's really just to keep the water temperature reasonable for any fish you may have. So some morning sun and afternoon shade, for example, would still be enough for the umbrella sedge without overheating the fish. There is another way to propagate dwarf umbrella sedge besides division. Earlier I mentioned that it can form huge colonies. It achieves this not only by a continually expanding crown and root ball, but also by growing new plants from the tips of the fronds or the bracts. They naturally grow up, then start bending over until they touch the water or ground, and new plants will form on the ends, and which will form new clumps of umbrella sedge. So this keeps happening exponentially until all of the smaller clumps grow together, forming a huge colony. So this is a clue as to how to propagate it. We can hack the plant's biology by simply cutting off the frond or the bract, placing the end of it in the water, and after a few weeks it will start forming a new plant. This is how I propagate my plants that I sell. It's easy and it's effective, and these are all propagations at differing stages of development. But this plant can also grow wonderfully indoors in an aquarium. I grow a wide range of tropical plants out of my riparian style fish tanks to help filter the water, which helps me reduce water changes. And one of my favorite plants is Dwarf Umbrella Sedge. I grow it in the fish tank the same way as in the pond, in a planter with media hanging on the rim. Here's a new plant that I just potted up, growing in all natural clay, but I've also used gravel and lava rock with great results. Supplemental light will need to be provided for Dwarf Umbrella Sedge growing out of an aquarium. And I've successfully grown it using anything from LED shop lights, but also grow light bulbs for multiple years. Sufficient light will help it grow strong and healthy, and it can grow quickly once it's established, but you can always trim the excess growth periodically to control it. The fact that it grows quickly is an indicator that it's removing excess nutrients, helping to filter the water. All the leaf and stem growth requires nitrogen, and that's the biggest thing it's removing from the water. The only caveat to growing Dwarf Umbrella Sedge out of a fish tank is to make sure you have an appropriately sized tank, like a 29-gallon or larger, and plenty of height over the tank, because it can grow 3 to 4 feet tall. If you can provide these conditions and adequate lighting, this amazing plant will help filter your aquarium water and add a new dimension of beauty to your tank. With all aquatic plants, whether for a fish tank or for an outdoor pond, care should be taken not to introduce them into your local waterways, and check to make sure these plants are not considered invasive species in your area before purchasing. Well, hopefully this video will be a great resource for you for growing Dwarf Umbrella Sedge. Whether you buy it from me or somewhere else, I just want you to know how beautiful and versatile and fun this plant is to grow, especially out of a fish tank.